What if the next global economic superpower isn't the one you expect, and the shift is already underway? What if, while the world is distracted by short-term crises, an alternate economy is quietly forming beneath the surface of the global system? The global economy is entering a decade of instability. Aging populations across the West, historic debt saturation, fragile supply chains, and a growing geopolitical fracture between the United States and China. The old pillars of economic leadership are under pressure, struggling to adapt to a future defined by AI, automation, and relentless technological acceleration. At the same time, a different force is gaining momentum. India combines something no other major economy fully possesses: massive demographic scale, a rapidly digitized population, expanding industrial capacity, and a growing role in AI-driven services. While megacorporations search for new markets, new labor pools, and new centers of innovation, India begins to position itself not just as a participant, but as a gravitational center of the global economy. This isn't prediction. It's a simulation. A global economy with a scenario where capital flows, supply chains, and technological powers slowly realign. Where future predictions no longer revolve around a bipolar world, but around a deeper transformation of economic gravity itself. AI systems optimize production, megacorporations adapt their strategies, and governments respond to pressures they didn't fully anticipate. And quietly, the balance of influence begins to tilt. Stay with me through the simulation. What you're about to discover may change how you see economic power, global leadership, and the future of work itself. Because this alternate timeline isn't driven by science fiction. It's driven by forces already shaping the world today. Maybe this future is closer to reality than it seems. And it's exactly here, in these early signals of disruption and opportunity, that this alternate timeline begins to take shape. As we move deeper into this alternate economy, your perspective matters. If this scenario feels plausible to you, or if a specific detail stood out, say it in a short comment. That exchange helps refine the simulation and signals that these future predictions deserve space in the global conversation. And if this analysis resonates, a simple like quietly tells the algorithm that serious explorations of the global economy would still have an audience. Subscribing, when it feels right, connects you to a growing community that wants more than headlines. People try to understand where power, AI, and megacorporations may actually be taking us. Your participation doesn't interrupt the simulation. It strengthens it. Because now, the timeline begins to accelerate. Capital starts to move. Jobs start to shift. Markets react before governments do. And in the first few years of this alternate future, the consequences of India's rise begin to appear, not as a headline, but as subtle changes in everyday economic reality. And this is where the early years of the timeline truly start to unfold. In the first years of this alternate timeline, the shift doesn't arrive with a single announcement or a dramatic collapse. It arrives quietly, through data, through capital flows, through decisions made in boardrooms and server rooms. India begins to accelerate faster than models predicted. AI-driven services scale across finance, healthcare, logistics, and education. Manufacturing that once moved east now reshapes itself again, drawn by cost efficiency, digital infrastructure, an enormous domestic market ready to consume. Global companies don't make speeches about it. They simply move. Investment reallocates toward Indian megacities. Supply chains redraw themselves around new hubs. Talent pipelines, once centered on the United States or East Asia, begin feeding into a different core. For ordinary people across the world, the impact feels subtle at first. Prices shift, digital platforms update their priorities, customer support accents change, and job markets quietly reorient. A new economic center is forming, not through force, but through gravity. As the years pass, governments and institutions can no longer ignore the signal. Central banks recalibrate risk models. Trade ministries rewrite long-term assumptions. In Washington and Beijing, the realization sets in that the competition is no longer only between them. The China tightens strategic control over key industries. The U.S. doubles down on AI regulation, reshoring incentives and financial dominance. But megacorporations move faster than states. They integrate deeply into India's ecosystem, aligning data, infrastructure, and labor at a scale never seen before. Now I want to go even deeper into the scenario. Over the next decade, the global map begins to look unfamiliar. New economic blocs form around trade corridors, digital payment systems, and AI governance standards shaped by India's priorities. Legacy institutions lose influence as parallel systems emerge. This isn't just a geopolitical shift, it's a mental one. The collective mindset of the global economy adjusts to a new reference point. Two extreme futures begin to crystallize. In one, an abundance economy emerges. Productivity explodes, technology becomes cheaper, access expands, and billions experience upward mobility. In the other, power concentrates. Wealth, data, and decision-making compress into a narrow alliance of states and megacorporations, creating a highly efficient but deeply unequal world. The difference between these paths isn't technology. It's governance, transparency, and intent. When this new order stabilizes, the deepest transformation is no longer economic. It's human. Work changes meaning. Ambition reshapes itself. Cultural influence shifts. People begin questioning purpose, routine, and identity inside systems optimized by AI and economic logic. This journey forces societies to confront an uncomfortable truth hidden in the Bastidor's Des Futuro. Progress doesn't automatically equal fulfillment. If this resonates with you, leave a comment with the phrase, "That makes sense to me," because the most important revelation of this timeline is still ahead, and it will challenge how power, value, and humanity itself are defined. As this alternate timeline moves into years 3 through 7, the initial shock hardens into strategy. What once looked like a market anomaly is now recognized as a structural shift. The United States responds first, deploying aggressive industrial policy, reshoring incentives, and expansive AI sovereignty laws designed to keep data, talent, and algorithms within its sphere of control. Central banks adjust interest rate logic, no longer focused only on inflation, but on technological competitiveness and long-term productivity survival. At the same time, China tightens its grip. Capital controls harden. Strategic sectors become untouchable. AI development is fused directly into state planning, blurring the line between economic growth and national security. The old rivalry between Washington and Beijing doesn't disappear, but begins to feel incomplete, as both realize they are reacting to a third gravitational force rather than controlling the system themselves. Now I want to go even deeper into this scenario, because the most decisive actors aren't governments alone. Megacorporations move with a different logic. They consolidate power, streamline operations, and form deep alliances with the Indian state. Access to data, labor, and domestic markets becomes the new currency of influence. In exchange for infrastructure investment and technological integration, corporations gain unprecedented scale. This isn't globalization as we knew it. It's alignment. As the decade unfolds, economic competition quietly shifts away from flags and borders. Techno-economic blocs emerge, networks of states, platforms, payment systems, and AI standards bound together by interoperability rather than ideology. India sits at the center of one of the largest of these blocs, shaping trade rules, digital identity systems, and invisible protocols that govern everyday economic life. Two extreme futures begin to separate themselves in the background. In one, this consolidation enables an abundance economy. Efficiency lowers costs, access expands, and innovation spreads faster than inequality can deepen. In the other, concentration wins. Decisions narrow. Power compresses. A small coalition of institutions determines outcomes for billions, creating stability at the cost of agency. The truth hidden in the Bastidor's Des Futuro is that both outcomes grow from the same root, scale. When this new order stabilizes, the deepest impact is felt far from markets. People sense a transformation in their routines, ambitions, and mentality collectiva. Careers become more fluid but less secure. Purpose detaches from geography. Identity shifts from nationality toward economic function. The journey through this future forces a confrontation with an uncomfortable revelation. Systems can be optimized while meaning remains unresolved. If this reflection resonates, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." Because beyond power and policy, there's one more layer of this timeline still unfolding, and it challenges how we define control, choice, and the future itself. As this alternate timeline moves beyond the first decade, The transformation becomes impossible to ignore. What once felt like adaptation now looks like a new architecture of power. By years 7 to 15, the global economy no longer revolves around a single axis or familiar rivalry. A new order emerges, and India sits at its core, not as an empire, but as a system. Trade routes reorganize themselves around Indian ports, logistics platforms, and manufacturing corridors. Digital payments increasingly flow through standards defined outside Western institutions. AI governance frameworks, once debated in fragmented forms, consolidate around protocols shaped by Indian regulators, engineers, and market realities. This isn't dominance through force. It's dominance through integration. Quiet, efficient, and difficult to reverse. Over time, traditional institutions begin to lose their gravitational pull. Legacy financial bodies struggle to keep relevance as alternative systems scale faster, cheaper, and with fewer political constraints. South-led economic alliances expand, connecting emerging markets through shared infrastructure, data standards, and capital access. The bipolar world dissolves into something more complex. A multi-layered system where influence flows through networks rather than flags, but always bends toward the same center. Now I want to go even deeper into the scenario, because this is where the hidden consequences start to surface. Two extreme futures grow from the same foundation. In one, an abundance economy takes shape. Productivity gains compound. Costs fall. Access to technology, education, and financial tools spreads across billions of people. This world feels lighter, faster, and more open, a rare alignment between scale and inclusion. In the other future, concentration tightens. The same systems that enable efficiency also narrow decision-making. Power consolidates into a dense core of institutions, platforms, and regulatory frameworks. Stability exists, but agency erodes. The truth hidden in the Ambassador's Des Futuro is unsettling. Both outcomes are rational, and both emerge from the same economic logic. When this new order stabilizes, the most profound impact isn't measured in GDP. It's measured in people. Daily routines adapt to algorithmic coordination. Careers stretch across borders but feel less anchored. Identity shifts again, shaped by economic function more than nationality. The mentality collectiva evolves toward constant adaptation, where long-term certainty feels obsolete. This journey forces a quiet transformation in how individuals understand purpose, success, and control. And beneath all of it lies a final revelation still forming, one that challenges whether the system ultimately serves human intent or slowly rewrites it. If this perspective resonates, write in the comments, "This future feels closer than I expected." Because the next layer of this timeline will test not just global power, but the limits of choice itself. As this alternate timeline advances, the world begins to feel the weight of a fork in the road. The same forces that lifted India to the center of the global economy now start producing radically different outcomes, depending on how they are guided. At first, the distinction is almost invisible. In the early years, growth looks universally positive. Technology becomes cheaper. Digital infrastructure spreads faster than expected. AI-driven productivity lowers costs across healthcare, education, logistics, and energy. For billions, life becomes more connected, more efficient, and seemingly more full of opportunity. In this version of the future, abundance compounds. As the decade unfolds, access replaces scarcity as the dominant economic theme. Small businesses scale globally from day one. Emerging regions leapfrog outdated systems. Poverty declines not through charity, but through integration into a faster, smarter economic engine. The impact feels transformative. Decisions once constrained by geography dissolve. The mentality collectiva shifts toward possibility, as if the system itself is finally working with human momentum instead of against it. Now I want to go even deeper into the scenario, because running parallel to this hopeful path is another future built from the same architecture. In this version, AI-driven capital becomes increasingly concentrated. Governance lags behind scale. Transparency erodes quietly. Economic power compresses into a narrow alliance of states, platforms, and financial entities capable of controlling data flows, algorithms, and market access. Efficiency remains high, but freedom narrows. Inequality doesn't explode, it calcifies. Over time, this concentration produces a rigid hierarchy optimized by algorithms rather than debated by societies. Opportunities exist, but only within predefined lanes. The truth hidden in the Bastidores del Futuro is unsettling. Most people are not excluded violently. They are optimized into place. The journey through life becomes predictable, guided by systems that claim neutrality, but encode silent decisions about value, relevance, and risk. When this order stabilizes, the deepest transformation unfolds inside the human experience. Routine becomes automated. Purpose becomes harder to define. Identity drifts away from culture and toward economic function. People begin to sense that something essential has shifted, even if material conditions improve. The revelation is subtle but profound. A system can deliver abundance while slowly eroding agency. Both futures grow from the same root. The difference isn't technology. It's governance. It's who controls AI-driven capital, how transparent those systems are, and whether human intent remains embedded in their design. And as this timeline continues to unfold, the tension between these paths intensifies, setting the stage for a final reckoning that hasn't yet revealed its full shape. If this distinction resonates with you, write in the comments, "I see both futures." Because what comes next in the simulation will challenge not just economic structures, but the meaning of choice itself. As this alternate timeline settles into its mature phase, the most profound changes no longer appear on balance sheets or trade maps. They appear in daily life. Work begins to feel different. Ambition is recalibrated. Cultural influence slowly realigns around a new economic reference point shaped by Indian norms, rhythms, and values, not imposed but absorbed through platforms, standards, and habits that now feel natural simply because they're everywhere. In the early years, education systems adapt first. Curricula shift toward scalable skills, AI fluency, and continuous reskilling. Credentials become modular, portable, and algorithmically verified. Over time, digital identities evolve alongside them, tying learning, work history, and economic participation into unified systems. Success is no longer defined by where you are from, but by how efficiently you integrate into these networks. The impact is subtle, but irreversible. As the decade unfolds, routine itself transforms. Work becomes more flexible, yet more exposed to constant evaluation. Opportunities expand globally, but competition feels omnipresent. People navigate a journey where choices appear abundant, yet increasingly guided by invisible systems optimizing outcomes in the background. The mentality collectiva shifts toward adaptation as a permanent state. Stability is no longer expected. Responsiveness is. Now I want to go even deeper into this scenario, because beneath efficiency lies a quieter tension. Cultural narratives begin to change. Ideas of progress, community, and individual purpose slowly realign with economic function. Influence flows through digital ecosystems rather than traditional institutions. Art, media, and aspiration reflect a world where economic gravity is moved, and with it, the stories societies tell about success and meaning. When this new order stabilizes, humanity confronts a deeper question. Is this a more inclusive global economy, finally extending opportunity beyond historic centers of power? Or is it simply a new version of centralization, smoother, smarter, and more difficult to challenge? The truth hidden in the Bastidores del Futuro is uncomfortable. Inclusion and control can coexist. People sense the transformation, even if they can't fully name it. Life feels optimized, but not always fulfilled. Purpose becomes something to actively construct rather than inherit. Decisions feel personal, yet shaped by systems few truly see. The revelation emerging from this timeline is not about India alone. It's about whether any global system, one scaled to this level, can remain aligned with human intent. And as this question lingers, unresolved and pressing, the simulation continues to move forward. Toward a moment where the balance between abundance, control, and meaning will finally be tested. If this reflection resonates with you, write in the comments, "I'm questioning this future." Because the next phase of this timeline will reveal who ultimately decides what this new world is really for. As this alternate timeline continues to unfold, one reality becomes increasingly clear. India's ascent reshapes far more than markets or trade flows. It alters the very logic of global leadership. For decades, Economic authority followed a familiar path, anchored in the West or contested between established superpowers. Now, that assumption quietly dissolves. Power no longer belongs automatically to those who once defined the rules. It belongs to those who can adapt, integrate, and scale meaning in a transformed world. In the early years, this shift felt technical. Data centers, payment systems, supply chains. But over time, its impact becomes philosophical. As economic gravity moves east and south, institutions designed for a different era struggle to keep coherence. Regulatory frameworks lag behind reality. Political systems built around national borders confront networks that ignore them. Values once presented as universal reveal themselves as contextual, shaped by the conditions that produce them. Now I want to go even deeper into this reflection, because the unanswered question isn't whether this transition happens. It's whether societies are ready to follow it. Education systems adapt, but do cultural expectations keep pace? Governance evolves, but do ethical frameworks evolve with it? Individuals gain access to global opportunity, yet feel unmoored from familiar definitions of success and belonging. The journey through this future exposes a truth that's easy to avoid. Economic transformation always demands psychological transformation as well. When this new order stabilizes, the contrast becomes sharper. Some embrace the shift, seeing it a chance to rebalance opportunity and redefine leadership beyond historic centers. Others experience dissonance, a sense that the world is moving forward without waiting for collective consent. The mentality collectiva fractures between adaptation and resistance, between curiosity and fear, between those who see possibility and those who feel displacement. The truth hidden in the Bastidor's Des Futuro is not about dominance or decline. It's about readiness. Are institutions flexible enough to survive a redistribution of influence? Are values resilient enough to travel across cultures without losing meaning? Are identities strong enough to evolve without collapsing into nostalgia? These are not economic questions alone. They are human ones. And as the simulation continues forward, one final tension remains unresolved. If leadership no longer comes from where it once did, who decides what progress actually means? Who defines fairness, purpose, and direction in a world reordered by new centers of gravity? If this question stays with you, write in the comments, "I'm thinking about this shift." Because the next step in this timeline doesn't reveal a new power. It reveals whether humanity can follow its own transformation. If you stayed with the simulation until now, it tells me something important. It means these alternate economic futures aren't just abstract ideas to you. They're questions worth sitting with. This channel exists for exactly that reason, to explore what if economy, future predictions, and deep simulations about where the global economy might actually be heading beyond headlines and short-term noise. If this way of thinking resonates, subscribing is simply a way to keep walking through these timelines together. If you reach the end, leave a comment with the phrase, "This future really made me think." It's a quiet signal that this kind of long-form, reflective analysis matters, and it helps this conversation reach others who are also questioning where all this is going. And if this journey added value to your perspective, a like helps more than it seems. It tells the system that serious explorations of alternate economies and global futures deserve visibility. There's another simulation waiting right here that connects directly with everything we just explored. Another timeline, another possibility, another question that hasn't been answered yet. Click it and keep going with me there. Which alternate economic future should I explore next?